Hi, I am Vitold and this is the big moment that some of us have been waiting for. I have analyzed all the data that I've been gathering for over a year when testing all the big adventure motorcycles on the market, and I'm ready to give you a summary and a rank of them all from the worst to the best. What I'm going to do in this video is take 11 motorcycles from this segment and compare them head to head, giving them scores in how well they do and show you how they place in a given category. Then based on this analysis, I'll show you what it looks like in two general categories, so city riding and touring, and the last part will be an overall place in my rank, but also based on the given scores and data. There will also be one bonus way of judging them based on how they do using a certain statistic, and there may be some surprises there. We all need to be on the same page here, so first of all we need to know how to define an adventure motorcycle and how I am scoring them. My perception of an adventure bike is a taller motorcycle that lets us sit in an upright position, that has a longer wheel travel to be more capable on worse quality roads, but it's still a road motorcycle in the first place, which only lets you do better on, for example, a gravel road. 150 horsepower, around 250 kilograms. Those motorcycles are not dirt bikes. Absolutely not in this especially segment of heavyweights. I've also ridden all mid-size adventure motorcycles already, and a full analysis of those will come too. All motorcycles in this video weigh over 200 kilograms and have over 100 horsepower. The contenders are, in just random order, BMW R1250 GS, KTM 1290 Super Adventure S, Super Adventure R as well, Triumph Tiger 1200 GT Pro, Triumph Tiger 100 Rally Explorer, Kawasaki Versys 1000 SE, Ducati Multistrada V4S, Honda Africa Twin 1100 Adventure Sports DCT ES, so with automatic transmission in a higher trim with electronically adjustable suspension. It's the most common option. Then a Harley Davidson Pan America Special with adaptive ride height, Suzuki v-strom 1050 that I tested at that time in XT variant, but keeping in mind the latest updates, and BMW S1000 XR as it ticks most of the boxes, and still in the first half of 2023 BMW had it designed to adventure segment in their official materials and on the website, and only close to the end of 2023 they moved it to sport right next to S1000 RR. Interesting. I have ridden all of those motorcycles. I have not purchased any of them. Every single one was rented from authorized dealers, and I haven't been given any of those for a month or so to test and make a favorable, sweet review. So I am unbiased here, and there is no external pressure or influence on me in any way, so I may be fully honest and transparent with you guys. I'm also not trying to sell you or advertise anything except for these brilliant electronically adjustable office chairs that are one of a kind, 7G11 from Power Seats. So I guess basically this all tells you something, and if you watched my other videos, that should be clear already. Also, I've been riding these motorcycles specifically to review them, so this video is not just an accidental byproduct, but a dedicated process that I've been working towards. Now, this video is also to help you focus on the areas that are the most important to every single one of you, and to know what you may want to pay extra attention to. I felt I've experienced all of these bikes, so it's a pretty good spot to mention the differences between them. Always before buying any of these, I do recommend that you ride and test them fully yourselves first. All right, the 16 main categories of comparison include suspension comfort, engine and performance, low speed handling, high speed handling, seat and position comfort, wind protection, brakes, tech, my subjective feeling of weight regardless of the numbers in a specification, subjective perception of sound, of design. Then I'll tell you what their ground clearance is as a main indication of how far you can expect to go with each one off the road. Well, off-road capabilities are not the focus of this comparison, but you may get the conclusions based on exactly ground clearance, on low speed handling, also engine and how it delivers power, and the feeling of weight, and all these points are included. Then we've got fuel tank sizes, drivetrain, just mentioning which bikes use shaft drive and which chain drive, then a category of price and value for money, and the last one is X factor. I will also explain what I pay attention to within these categories the most. At the time of making this video, the new BMW R1300 GS has been already presented I saw it in person, but I feel that the current R1250 GS will still stay in our heads and in our garages, many garages, for longer than we might have been expecting due to the new R1300 GS being quite different, and some may say that controversial because of that as well. I will compare it with the top bikes from today's comparison, and we will be able to compare the scores at that point. Now fasten your seatbelts, or rather put your helmets on, and here we go, starting off with suspension comfort. Here, the less you feel the bumps, the better, while feeling that the bike is under control and doesn't behave like a boat. Then ease and range of adjustments of that suspension matter too. And here the last 11th place and 3 points out of 10 go to Honda Africa Twin 1100 Adventure Sports DCT-ES, which, despite having a nice feature of electronic suspension adjustment in this particular version, is pretty harsh right after the initial compression, and it feels as if it is hurting the bike with every bump. As similar to it is a KTM 1290 Super Adventure R, coming only with manual suspension adjustment and being just a little bit more rider friendly, but feeling less eager to hurt the bike and the rider, so getting 4 out of 10 points. On the 9th spot, there is Kawasaki Versys 1000 SE, so with electronically adjustable suspension that in the sport mode is basically unusable due to being way too stiff, and in other modes rear suspension feels too floaty in the corners. Suspension travel is small, while the good thing is that the front doesn't dive much. Better than a Versys 1000 SE is, in my opinion, a Suzuki v-strom 1050 that doesn't have electronically adjustable suspension and cannot have it, but is rather composed and feels pretty solid in general. It may be too stiff to some in the rear, while in the front it's as it's always been, so super soft and taking away some control because of that. Moving up the ladder to the 7th place, we've got BMW S1000XR of the 2nd generation, which is very different than the 1st generation, and it actually is pretty comfortable and composed. Electronic adjustment doesn't let you change its setup much, and suspension travel is also small like in a Versys 1000 SE, but it's overall a pleasant suspension that deals surprisingly well with bumps, and gets a 7 out of 10. 6th place and also 7 out of 10 gets a Multistrada V4S with electronically adjustable and quite competent suspension. I wish it was more comfortable, but it makes the bike feel well planted and always ready. Better than this one is BMW R1250 GS with ESA electronically adjustable suspension, which doesn't let you change the bike's behavior that much, or as much as some better in this area competitors do. It is more comfortable than a Multistrada a little bit, but the capabilities could be better. On the other hand, the frontal lever suspension is amazing, and it keeps the bike totally flat and under control no matter what you do with it. It also gets 7 points out of 10. Now, KTM 1290 Super Adventure S can be more comfortable suspension-wise and can have a dedicated anti-dive system that does something, and I appreciate KTM for trying. On the 3rd place of my comparison is a Triumph Tiger 1200 Rally with electronically adjustable suspension that is super comfortable and with a huge range of adjustment than standard Tiger 1200 GT has. The 2nd place goes to the newcomer to the segment, so Harley-Davidson Pan America Special, with a suspension that can lower itself when you stop to reach the ground easier. This is impressive as well, but what gets it 8 points is how comfortable it can get. It's a fantastic thing to have, but the best suspension is, in my opinion, in the Triumph Tiger 1200 in the GT variant. So without the taller suspension, it receives 9 out of 10 points thanks to being amazingly composed no matter what you do. There is enormous range of adjustment from, again, Rolls-Royce-like to Ferrari-like, and so it gives you whatever you want. It can be also extremely comfortable. That's the winner here. A bonus information is an indication of motorcycles that are above the average in green and those that are underperforming and in red. This will give us an interesting separate summary in the end, and that's going to be that bonus. In the engine and performance category, the quicker the bike and the more effortless while being easy to control and smooth power delivery wise, the better. And the last place goes to Kawasaki Versys 1000, which may feel underpowered with just 120 horsepower and 102 Nm of torque. It has quite short gearing for a 4-cylinder, which would actually help it, if not for the fact that Kawasaki forbid it to rev high enough, and so it took away the most fun. It also gets way too hot in city traffic, especially. 4 out of 10 points is its score. On the 10th spot, with 5 out of 10 points, we've got a BMW S1000 XR. And yay, perhaps a surprise, because having almost the most power out of the bunch, as 165 horsepower combined with, well, not so much 114 newtons of torque and super long gears, this time is also not the best recipe. All that power is located high up. So once you reach some speed, it is mind-blowing and one of the 2-3 most exciting motorcycles here, but until you get there, it's just a little bit sluggish. Flexibility in higher gears is quite poor, so it's essentially a sports bike that should be ridden like one in terms of engine. On the 9th spot, there is a very interesting Honda Africa Twin with an automatic transmission, which is amazing. I think it's basically flawless if you switch to one of the S modes, so the more sporty ones. It changes gears super quickly, but having 102 horsepower, which is the least in the bunch, and 105 newton-meters of torque, overall performance just isn't as great as some others. So it gets 6 points out of 10. Better than Africa is BMW R1250 GS with its 136 horsepower and stunning 143 newton-meters of torque, which allow it to overtake basically instantly and not play with the gearbox too much when touring especially. But at higher RPM, it feels like the whole thing is going to explode any second, and you can feel that there is a lot of effort put into propelling the bike, so I'm giving it also 6 out of 10 points. A slower and less powerful motorcycle in the form of a v-strom 1050 with 107 horsepower and 100 newton-meters of torque feels more aggressive and more eager to accelerate while also getting 6 points. I put it before a BMW R1250 GS even despite being slower, but it just encourages you to play with the throttle, and I like that. It cannot match the Ducati Multistrada V4S that's on the 6th place with 6 points. There's so much power. The thing is that all that top power there, so 170 horsepower with 125 newtons of torque, it isn't easy to access as the gears are way too short, I think, especially for what this engine can do. It also gets extremely hot, which is a real-life issue. More on that in my full review of this bike that's also linked in the description. But now 7 points out of 10, and the 5th place go to the Tiger 1200 Rally. As with 150 horsepower and 130 newton-meters of torque, it is a good balance of low and high-end access to power. It is smooth, it doesn't heat up too much, and it just goes. It's not as quick as the Multistrada, but it's just more pleasant to deal with every day. On the 4th place, there is Tiger 1200 GT, which has exactly the same engine and setup like the Rally, but thanks to overall feel of the bike, even despite having that identical engine, it just gives an impression of being quicker and more even flexible than the Rally version. It's just a perception, however. An interesting result is now a Harley-Davidson Pan America, regardless of being special or not being special, with its V2 engine and also 150 horsepower just like the Tiger and 128 newton-meters of torque. That is a really quick bike, and it makes you feel like there's always a large power reserve waiting for you. Strong from the bottom, easy to control, flexible enough, and with good manners. That's the 3rd place with 8 out of 10 points. Now 9 points out of 10 and the 2nd place go to KTM 1290 Super Adventure S, that along with the R variant, which is on the 1st place with 10 out of 10 points, has an engine that's pure fire. It makes the bike shoot forward in any gear, any speed. It is super smooth, which gives it a feeling of absolute effortlessness like no other bike here. It feels simply the quickest, and it makes the world around you blurry because of acceleration. Very similar, I think, to BMW S1000 XR's experiences. But this one is flexible, it doesn't have any heat issues, there's no annoying vibration, and so it's pure joy. The difference between the S and the R is that R uses 100% of the engine's capabilities, while the S mostly slides around at lower speeds after opening the throttle because of crappy tires that KTM chose for it. Straight from the factory, the R will do wheelies, while the S will do burnouts. In green, you see motorcycles that perform better than average, and in red, underperforming ones, which doesn't mean that it's the slowest ones as you see that are underperforming. Low speed handling is the next category, and here the easier it is to ride, The less you need to fight with the bike for it to go where you want it, the better the balance and overall control so that you can steer precise, the better. On the last place sits Honda Africa Twin 1100 DCT Adventure Sports, and likely it's not because it's got a bigger tank than the regular version. It feels not very precise at low speeds. It's hard to ride perfectly straight and maintain the line when filtering traffic, and so it's hard to feel control over it and ride the way you want. 3 points out of 10 from me and Africa Twin fans. I know it is a sensitive one, but don't get upset yet, as things change with higher speeds in a moment. Slightly better with 4 out of 10 points, we've got the Harley, which is pretty hard to control as well, and one of the reasons is that there is a sitting position with arms higher, like on a more kind of a typical Harley. Obviously this doesn't help steer the bike very well. Now on the 9th place there is BMW S1000XR that just feels a little bit reluctant and heavy, but it's still rather easy to feel, so it gets 5 points out of 10. Also 5 out of 10 go to KTM 1290 Super Adventure S. That's on the 8th place here, as it also feels reluctant to go where you want it to go. It is not feeling the easiest to control and doesn't inspire much confidence at the lowest speeds. 7th spot with 6 points out of 10 belongs to Triumph Tiger 1200 Rally. That feels easier to control, but somehow its geometry lets it fight you and resist you more successfully than the other one. It's not terrible and it will go as you want, but you will know that this is not what you should be doing with this bike. 6 points and 6th place are for a v-strom 1050 that isn't precise enough at low speeds, I feel, and it requires a lot of focus to go as you want it to, but it feels more manageable and competent here than the previous motorcycles in my opinion. Visibly better now is Ducati Multistrada V4S that gets 7 points out of 10 and sits comfortably on the 5th spot. It does everything right, I think, but it's not mind-blowing or just not as great as some others to come. And those others start with Tiger 1200 GT on the 4th spot, also with 7 points out of 10, and it's just totally neutral. It won't surprise you and is like a good dog that you need to tell what to do or to pull it and it will just do it. It feels a bit more neutral to me than the Multistrada V4S. The 3rd place goes to Kawasaki Versys 1000, which gets 9 out of 10 points in low speed handling because it's superb here. Totally under control, fantastic balance, easy to steer exactly like you want it and where you want it. Just feels a bit heavy between your legs. Maybe because it's one of the heaviest here, that could be the reason, but it's just great for crawling through traffic. Also great is KTM 1290 Super Adventure R, that's on the 2nd place, also with 9 points out of 10 from me, because it's also letting you do whatever you want from it at low speeds. It feels totally under control, and only because it's so high, you've got to be mentally ready to reach all that long way down. But the position on this bike makes it super fun to control and squeeze in wherever you want. The king here is BMW R1250 GS with 10 out of 10 points and the 1st place. This bike turns on its own at the lowest speeds. You just think and it goes there. Awesome balance, control and precision. The only warning might be that with a wide handlebar, turning very tight may cause you to have to reach very far with a handlebar, and it may be surprise to some. But it's so good that I feel that it needs to have the maximum score. Now in high-speed handling category, it's all about how easy and encouraging it is to turn into a corner, stay there, tighten it and change directions, as well as what happens when you accelerate or use your brake while leaning left or right. It's all about cooperation or the lack of it. The one that will kick your butt here is Kawasaki Versys 1000 SE on the 11th place, that doesn't really want to turn and lean so much, and once you use a brake in a corner, be careful as the bike straightens up a lot, which may lead to shooting out from the corner. It's a bit of a risky one that doesn't like cornering very much and gets a 3 out of 10. 4 points and 10th place go to KTM 1290 Super Adventure R, which will fight you and do whatever it can not to turn in the first place. It will resist you, but at least nothing dramatic happens when using the brakes or accelerating in lean. This one dislikes corners and you've got to put on some weight. Go to the gym if you want to engage in a battle with this bike there. Triumph Tiger Rally is on the 9th place with 6 points. It does fine while being a bit of a whale on wheels and requiring more effort to turn than the next bike, so Harley-Davidson Pan America Special, which is also shorter than the Triumph. Harley does also pretty fine at speeds and gets 6 points out of 10, but BMW S1000 XR on the 7th position, also with 6 points, feels just more like it's where it should be when ridden faster and leaning left and right. The amount of control and sort of being planted here is more visible in it to me. Then KTM 1290 Super Adventure S gets more points at 7 out of 10 because it does the same just with less effort, I feel. It is not super quick to change directions, but it feels like it will let you do whatever you want at speeds, and I appreciate that. It is quite similar to Suzuki v-strom 1050, which I believe also deserves 7 out of 10 points here, but I am placing it on a position right before the KTM as it feels like it's willing to play just a tiny bit more. A tiny bunny, but I think it's there despite KTM's very fancy and nice suspension. Now, all of these aren't that super eager to turn from a corner to a corner until a Honda Africa Twin 1100 Adventure Sports comes with its 7 points out of 10, and this is the first bike that actually is happy to lean and turn, which is quite surprising and very enjoyable. So good job by Honda here. The way Africa throws itself into the corners is impressive. I really like that. The Tiger 1200 GT isn't perhaps as eager to start leaning left and right, but the way it's neutral and how it follows is fantastic. It reminds me of a v-strom, just even lighter to turn, lighter to tighten, and to control the bike in the corners. Very good and super linear and predictable all around from all the speeds, even the lowest, and this is why I'm placing it before the Honda and giving it 8 out of 10 points on the 3rd place. Ducati Multistrada, that's more sporty oriented, gets just before it because it feels slightly more encouraging to play with in the corners, while being also very neutral and predictable at all speeds. And while at low speeds it's not that important, the high speeds the stakes are higher, and I believe that a Multistrada deserves to have 8 points and be right behind the bike that's best handling at speeds. So BMW R1250 GS. Regardless of speed, R1250 GS feels like telepathically connected to you, and it jumps instantly from a corner into a corner. Riding it on twisty road is an absolute dream. And to me, with its effortlessness, the ease of pulling that off, its perfect balance, control and neutrality, it beats all of its competitors and gets 10 points out of 10, winning here. Heading to a very important seat and position comfort. Here it's all about how comfortable the seat feels, if there is anything that's poking you from down there, if the fuel tank can be comfortably held with your legs, or rather it hurts your jewels, what the foot pegs position is like, along with the handlebar position and width. For the record, I am 183 centimeters tall or 6 feet tall, and I like the seats to be more on the softer side, with the foot pegs as low as possible to achieve a knee angle that I do prefer. The last position here goes to KTM 1290 Super Adventure S with only 4 out of 10 points, and a super crazy hard and uncomfortable to me seat that is adjustable between 85 and 87 centimeters in height. In the lower seat position, foot pegs appear to be quite high in relation. On top of that, fairly narrow handlebar combined with a lot of resistance when turning it makes for a struggle. Just as uncomfortable seat is on the bike that's on the 10th place, so a Honda Africa Twin with a terribly as well hard seat that can go from 85 to 87 centimeters in height, and is actually wide enough for me. My knee angle on it is better, and it gets a 5 out of 10. It is better on a KTM 1290 Super Adventure R that's on the 9th place with a more comfortable seat than those two, and it's located at 88 centimeters, but it's not adjustable. Now there is some knee angle issues here as well, just like on the S, which makes operating the gear lever and rear brake hard, but here an overall position is much more aggressive and sort of in control, which is awesome. That's a 6 out of 10. On the 8th place with the same score of 6 out of 10 is the BMW S1000 XR, which I enjoy the seat of and overall position on, but I'm aware that many more bulky riders than me don't like that it's limiting the movement once you're in that seat at 84 centimeters. It's not gonna let you move forward, backward too much. Suzuki v-strom 1050 is next, also with 6 points and too hard of a seat, but an overall very comfortable position, including foot pegs. If you replace the seat, you should be great on it. With 7 points, and on the 6th place is the Harley with a soft and very comfortable seat, but high handlebar that makes the position strange, and it takes away some of the good feelings. The seat is originally at 85 centimeters and can be raised to 87 around, according to Harley. And once the bike's suspension lowers, if you activate that adaptive ride height on the special variant, it drops to 83 centimeters, and short riders should appreciate that. 7 out of 10 also go to Kawasaki Versys 1000, which has an interestingly positioned handlebar that is rather narrow and which somehow suits me. The seat is not too hard, but it is too narrow for me in the front and may cause discomfort there. It's also fixed at 84 centimeters. There's a slight lean forward, which is mostly noticeable when braking. 7 points also go to BMW R1250 GS, which is on the 4th position here, and its super wide handlebar may be challenging to some riders, but it's at the perfect height for me. Knee angle is very comfortable, and the adjustable seat is fine at 85 or 87 centimeters, but it could be softer, which would be my biggest wish here. Ducati Multistrada V4S feels just a bit better to me, and with the adjustable seat at 84 or 86 centimeters, it gets 8 out of 10 points from me here, and is placed on the 3rd place. Knee angle on it is just as good as on the BMW R1250 GS. The seat appears softer, and the handlebar width and position are just great for me. But nothing can beat an awesome seat and perfect sitting position on both Tigers 1200 GT and Rally that both get 9 out of 10 points, and to me this is what the most comfortable sitting environment is like. Lower GT variant is on the 1st place, while Rally on the 2nd, as it's just a little bit perhaps harder to live with it in general with the Rally, harder to support yourself when standing and holding its weight because it's higher. But these are the two best ones to me here. Let's get to 2 more very important aspects in the segment. So first, wind protection. Here it's about how well you are shielded from any stream of wind, how smooth the flow of the air is where it actually hits you if you are not fully shielded, which is, well, always the case with stock windshields, even here. And thirdly, about the adjustment system, if there is any. Here all bikes have it as standard. I only cannot judge KTM 1290 Super Adventure S since the dealer replaced its stock windscreen with the one from the R variant, so I couldn't test it. This way, the last spot goes to that R variant, as that screen protects you from nothing. It gets 4 points out of 10 because despite wind protection being non-existent, the adjustment system is easy to use on the fly with either hand. Then on the 9th place there is BMW S1000 XR, which doesn't protect you very much and only has 2 height positions that don't differ that much. No turbulences, and that's a plus, but still it gets 4 out of 10 points. Suzuki v-strom 1050 is next, also with 4 points out of 10 because its adjustment system requires you to stop the bike and walk in front of it to adjust the windscreen. Not much turbulences here either, but the windscreen isn't very helpful overall. Then there is a Tiger 1200 GT that would block some air, and it has an adjustment system that changes something in terms of height and protection. It can also get stuck at the same time and bend dangerously, and there's quite a bit of turbulences left, and I'm having air coming into my helmet along with the debris from the bottom. So it's also getting 4 out of 10 points and lands on the 7th position, just before the Rally variant, also with 4 out of 10 points, and this being only because of my Rally coming in an Explorer trim with a larger fuel tank that enhances wind protection a little bit. With 5 points out of 10 comes a Versys 1000 SE on the 5th place. There is height adjustment that requires using both hands, so not the best, and it gets more turbulences the faster you go, along with more insects hitting your helmet that are coming, I believe, through that hole in the windscreen. But it feels better than others so far. It's a bit like on a Harley-Davidson Pan America that also gets 5 points out of 10 and jumps above the Versys because there is no terrible turbulences, and it does protect you despite that protection not being enough even in the tallest position. It's getting loud behind the screen at speeds. Adjustment system is not the easiest to use with 2 actions having to happen, so pull and then move. Then there is finally Honda Africa Twin 1100 on the 3rd place with fairly okay wind protection and 6 points out of 10 here. Its tall front end helps cover you well. There aren't any turbulences, and only the adjustment system requires using both hands, so it's not quite there yet. BMW R1250 GS lets you use one hand twisting the knob, which takes time and it may not be very intuitive, but it generally works. There aren't any turbulences, but the windscreen is still too short for me to cover me well enough. It also gets 6 out of 10 points. Then the winner with 7 out of 10 points, so still not that impressive, but there comes Ducati Multistrada V4S with a great adjustment system that works easily, fluidly, quickly, and can be used with one hand as well. Not much turbulences, but the bike still would, I think, benefit from a taller windscreen. Good thing is that for every bike you will find aftermarket windscreens, taller ones or shorter ones but more smooth, and if an adjustment system is any good, then you can get to what you want anyway. And the last out of the key categories are brakes, and it's more interesting than it sounds. It's about the power of braking, how easy the brakes are to dose, if they are nervous or predictable, and does the rear brake actually do anything? Alright, so which bike will be the most challenging here? It's Kawasaki Versys 1000C that receives 2 out of 10 points because the rear brake doesn't do much, but the real issue is that the front one maxes out unexpectedly quickly, at least in the bike that I got. I was able to easily pull the front brake lever so that it rests against the grip. This to me is unacceptable and it might be a hazard. However, when riding I was able to stop always on time, hence, well, 2 points. On the 10th place with 4 points out of 10 there is Honda Africa Twin 1100 with a weak front brake that on top of that requires squeezing hard like an empty tube of toothpaste. Forget about one finger braking. Thankfully the rear brake is okay. Harley-Davidson Pan America Special is a bit better on the 9th place with 5 out of 10 points and a strong front brake that is only actually strong when you put a lot of force into encouraging it to be strong. The rear brake does close to nothing, so there is no point in bothering it. Now also with 5 out of 10 points we've got 2 triumphs with the Tiger 1200 Rally on the 8th position and GT on the 7th. Both have front brakes that are strong enough, but they grab suddenly after the initial movement of the lever with pretty much no resistance. Once they engage, the front suspension compresses a lot, it's very sudden, and it's even more dramatic in the Rally, hence the GT is above it. So the strength is there, but ease of dosing is not. You will get better with time, getting used to it, but knowing other motorcycles there are much better systems. Rear brakes here are visibly less effective and with a very sensitive ABS, so you just end up using that front one anyway. And with Suzuki v-strom 1050 we've got a jump by 2 points to 7 out of 10 and a pretty good brake system that places the v-strom on the 6th place. It's simply adequate, just causing the front suspension to dive seriously, which impacts the overall experience. You will see that it matters too once you ride the best one here. Close to it is Ducati Multistrada, also with 7 points on the 5th place and with less front suspension dive than the v-strom and also a competent brake system overall. But the next one on the 4th place with 8 out of 10 points is even nicer to use, and it belongs to a KTM 1290 Super Adventure R that can brake super hard, super predictably, and with a properly working and effective rear brake. The only thing that doesn't allow me to put it on top with a higher mark is that the front suspension dives a lot when using the front brake. It's a combination of factors, but it is a braking experience that then is better on the next one. So the KTM 1290 Super Adventure S with an optional anti-dive front suspension and shorter wheel travel. This bike is on the 3rd place with also 8 points, and everything the same applies, just there's less front suspension dive. But even less, but with the similar performance there is on a BMW S1000 XR from the 2nd place with also 8 out of 10 points, and that's why it's before KTM's. It's great, but there is one greater thing: riding on earth on 2 wheels, and it's braking like a rock thrown at another rock. It's a BMW R1250 GS with brakes as strong as on KTM's and the S1000XR, as easy to dose, but feeling much better because the bike simply doesn't dive almost at all. So you brake and the bike doesn't feel like it's struggling or you lose any ability to steer. This makes braking an amazing experience that provokes you to squeeze the lever harder and harder, and this is one of a kind experience thanks to the front telelever suspension. It absolutely wins here in my opinion, and it's definitely getting 10 out of 10 points. And so we move to the tech category, where I will give you some key elements, but I won't dig into details as there are my individual comparisons and full reviews of each of these bikes. In this one, it's first of all about safety features, which they all basically have except for tire pressure monitoring system. Then it's about fancy equipment like keyless start, electronically adjustable suspension, radars in the front and in the rear, how nice their displays are, and then how modern and up-to-date in general they feel. The least tech advanced, the Suzuki v-strom 1050 that got updated for 2023, while what you see is the earlier 2022 XT in this video, but I'm going to be referring to the current one, and it doesn't have any of the fancy stuff that I mentioned except for a one push start, which is cool. There's also a quick shifter now, there are riding modes, but that's basically it. It gets 4 out of 10 on the 10th place. Then with 5 out of 10 points comes a Versys 1000, which in the SE variant has electronically adjustable suspension and cornering front lights that a v-strom cannot have. And it also used to already have a quick shifter before that Suzuki added to the v-strom from 2023 on. On the 8th place, there is Honda Africa Twin that on one hand can have electronically adjustable suspension, DCT, so basically an automatic gearbox, which is absolutely fantastic if you want it, and a full digital display that can be operated by touch in some places, in some circumstances. But since it loads 2 days, you're often left just with a backup one below that. Well, you be the judges what it looks like. Moving up the ladder with 6 out of 10 points comes the Harley that got a quick shifter option added after I tested the bike, but it also comes with keyless ignition. In some markets there can be a keyless fuel cap, but mine for some reason didn't have it. There's a properly working digital screen and a tire pressure monitoring system that the ones before don't have, while it's an important safety feature, I believe. In the Special, there is also electronically adjustable suspension with that adaptive ride height, so the bike being able to lower itself right before you put your foot down. You can also disable that function. Cool stuff. On the 6th place, there is BMW S1000XR that feels more modern thanks to its typical BMW display, which looks more fresh than the Harleys. It cannot lower itself though, but it can come with pretty much full equipment mentioned already. 5th place and also 6 points out of 10 go to KTM 1290 Super Adventure R, and on one hand, it doesn't have electronically adjustable suspension, but its display is just amazing and it gives a feeling of a top tech motorcycle. Suspension is adjustable, just manually. Now on the 4th place with 7 points out of 10 comes the BMW R1250 GS that can have both heated seats and comes with a drive shaft instead of a simple chain. It's got what others do, aside the Harley suspension, and that drive shaft matters. Now the 3rd place goes to both Triumphs, as technology-wise they can have the same. In the Explorer trim, they both come with blind spot monitoring system with a rear radar, and they have a great electronic suspension adjustment and use shaft drive like BMW R1250 GS. Now on the 2nd place I've put KTM 1290 Super Adventure S that doesn't have a drive shaft, but it can have optional anti-dive system that tries to do something, and there's also a front radar with adaptive cruise control and that fantastic display like in the R variant, which makes it feel much more modern than Triumph's screen that's choppy and laggy. But the winner with 9 points out of 10 is the Ducati Multistrada V4S that has radars both in the front and rear, which are a big part of tech. It is propelled by chain, unlike the more advanced in this area Triumphs and BMW GS. Its display is nothing special and there is no smart anti-dive system, but I care to appreciate Ducati's input into pushing others to develop new systems, and that's why it wins in this category. In the feeling of weight, it's about how it feels when dealing with the bike, so sitting on it and supporting yourself with your legs, and then when riding slowly and then when riding fast, all together. Numbers don't reflect real life experiences. And I'll be brief here. The heaviest to me feels Honda Africa Twin 1100 with 2 points out of 10, then the Harley with 3 points out of 10, and mostly because of a difficulty with a high handlebar. On the 9th place with 6 points out of 10, there is Tiger 1200 Rally. That's tall with a lot of weight up there that you will feel, and also when you will struggle to put it on a center stand. Better is Kawasaki Versys 1000 SC that I consider quite heavy to deal with. However, it's not as tall, so things aren't as challenging. But I remember saying to myself, oh, this feels heavy. There's a lot of steel out there. So 6 points for the Versys 1000 SC. Then also with 6 points is a KTM 1290 Super Adventure R, which is simply very tall with a high center of gravity. Moving it around is something, but it's much less intimidating than the Tiger Rally, for example, especially when riding. Then BMW S1000 XR, which feels similarly to a Versys, but likely, thankfully, to simply fewer kilograms, it doesn't scare you as much. On the 5th place, we've got KTM 1290 Super Adventure S. That's lower than the R, but feels close to it and is harder to ride at low speeds. So overall, it feels more manageable at standstill, but not exactly when riding. That's why also 6 points. Now 7 points and a 4th position is Ducati's place, as this bike feels easier to deal with than all the others mentioned so far. Close to it is a v-strom 1050, also with 7 points, but right before it is a Tiger 1200 GT, which seems just more friendly when it comes to managing its weight. On the 1st place, we've got BMW R1250 GS, which is fine to move around. It's not the lightest thing on earth. It's also not much better than others, but once you start riding, it is mind controlled and all the weight is basically gone. It's a complete transformation, and considering it all, it gets 8 out of 10 points from me. Now, one of my personal favorites, so sound. There's no simple way of judging this one, so I'll just show you my own, very personal ranking that starts in reverse with BMW R1250 GS on the last 9th place here with its 2-cylinder boxer engine that I cannot stand the sound of. Then BMW S1000 XR that sounds just like any other bike with a regular 4-cylinder engine, and I do prefer Versys' 4-cylinder engine that produces deep growl at idle that BMW lacks. Next is the Multistrada V4 with a 4-cylinder V engine, which is a bit strange in its construction, and the one I rode actually had an Akrapovic slip-on exhaust that did not help it much here. It whines like crazy at high RPM. Then I've got both Triumphs with their 3-cylinder inline engines that generate no sound at idle basically, but then they very nicely wake up at higher RPM. Where it gets fun is the 4th place that goes to Harley and its V2 engine that sounds nice when riding, but you cannot properly rev it as it's got a freaking rev limiter at 4000 RPM, which is not just ridiculous, but it's double ridiculous because it's a bloody Harley. Better are KTMs occupying the 3rd place together, thanks to their V2 engines that are very muted because of those chimneys successfully cutting their bowls of sound. But give them proper exhausts, they're gonna be awesome. The 2nd place goes to v-strom 1050 that sounds awesome with that mechanical, unusual sound that reminds me of a huge supercharger on a V8 car. With an aftermarket exhaust, this would be the top sounding motorcycle ever to me. But considering how they come from factory, so stock, Honda Africa Twin 1100 beats it because it's more punchy sounding, deeper, and with DCT changing gears at higher RPM, it can give you goosebumps. That's my favorite thing about this Africa, as it sounds unbelievable. Congratulations, Honda. Another short one and very personal is design. Here I'll start from the ones that I like looking at the most, and that's BMW S1000 XR, then KTM 1290 Super Adventure S, then the R with larger wheels and so looking like it's got a little bit less muscle, more lean. Next, Honda Africa Twin that just looks good from every angle. The 5th place goes to a more girly looking Multistrada. 6th to the GS, which looks like a bad boy, but that asymmetrical light isn't pretty to me, despite being iconic. Now on the 7th place there is Tiger 1200 GT, which is quite bland to me at this point. The same goes for the Rally, which has a larger front wheel and appears again less muscular to me with that setup. On the 9th, and at this point I'm closing my eyes, there is Kawasaki Versys 1000 with its butt up, then Suzuki DR Big with a V v-strom sticker that basically wasted a chance for a retro bike and instead just looks 4 years old, and the ugliest thing on earth, so Harley-Davidson Pan America very special. Ground clearance as an indication of off-road capabilities, but also simply as an advantage letting you ride wherever you want is the next category. The smallest ground clearance is likely on a BMW S1000 XR that there is actually no data for. Then on the 10th place is Kawasaki Versys 1000 with 15 centimeters, then a v-strom next BMW R1250 GS with 18.5 centimeters, then a complicated Harley-Davidson with either 17.5 or 21 depending on the variant and the situation and data from Harley. So let's count 19.25 centimeters on average. Tiger 1200 GT that has 20 centimeters, while I haven't found the data for Rally, so I need to assume that it's at 22, 23 centimeters, and this is above average here already. Then Multistrada V4 that has 22 centimeters, KTM 1290 Super Adventure S comes with 22.4 centimeters. The R variant has more at 24.2 centimeters, which is really a lot, but it doesn't beat the top one, so Africa Twin with its 25 centimeters, and so the king of ground clearance on the first place. Fuel tank capacity is not the key thing, but rather combined with fuel consumption, then it could give us a range which matters. But this requires exactly the same testing, which none of us is able to do long term, so I'll just show you the data for the fuel tank capacity. BMW, Triumph, Ducati and Honda have versions with larger and smaller fuel tanks for their bikes, so you can see that in the table as well. Now is the breakdown of which motorcycles use chain drive and which use shaft drive. So to me, better solution as they are maintenance free on a daily basis. BMW R1250 GS and both Triumphs have a big advantage here. They stay cleaner, they look better in that area, and they don't require your constant attention with stopping and spraying the chain that you need a spray can with you for. They don't need tensioning and replacing once in a while or installing a separate lubrication device. Now, the category of price and value for money is tricky when there are so many factors in our different preferences and financial circumstances. So I will first show you what it looks like on my market for various versions in relation to the cheapest bike in the segment, so Kawasaki Versys 1000 Standard, and there's a big difference between Standard and the SE. These versions have no additional equipment, and motorcycles from BMW, Ducati, Honda and Kawasaki have pretty much nothing in those setups. Then KTM's, Triumphs and Suzuki already have a lot of features that are extra, but they have them included in their base prices, so bear that in mind. For 7.5% more than a base Versys, you can have a v-strom, 8% more than a Versys, and you can get a standard Africa Twin. Now 26.2%, and there is a Tiger 1200 GT in your garage, 27, so just slightly more for BMW R1250 GS, but with not much equipment, and the rest you see. Now, this doesn't reflect the value for money, so I'll show you how I would score it for variants that I feel that make the most sense. Triumph Tiger 1200 GT Pro seems to me as the best value for money proposition, while Kawasaki Versys 1000, especially in the SE variant that's priced absolutely ridiculously on my market, at least with no discounts, that would be the last option if I were to choose based on what I get for money. And the last category is X factor, that I define as something that generates a lot of emotion, like excitement, thrill from riding to me. It can be translated and broken down into different things like acceleration, sound, like image of a motorcycle and a brand, like design or anything else. I'll tell you what I feel may be the most exciting in each bike while revealing how I score them here because of that. For me, the bike with the least X factor is Kawasaki. That sounds great at idle to the point of making the ground shake. Then I would point to the Triumph 1200 Rally that isn't very exciting to ride overall to me, but it can be fairly quick and it can sound nicely at high RPM. Some more excitement I would find in the Harley, simply because it's a Harley and it could sound nicely thanks to its V2 engine that pulls pretty well too, so performance is also a trigger. Right in front of it is the Triumph Tiger 1200 GT that can add good handling to what Rally offers, and overall it's nice to jump on it and ride. It feels manageable already. What I find more exciting is Honda Africa Twin 1100 GCT, as it's exciting to say that I have a Honda Africa Twin. And boy, that exhaust sound and fun to experience DCT transmission, that's something. But on a daily basis, I would take DCT out of the equation as it's fun to try once. So I would rather choose the v-strom here in the X Factor that's more provocative with its V2 engine that also sounds great, and it doesn't really have very annoying behaviors. So it's pretty nice to jump on it and just, go and push it. Stepping up, there is the Ducati, and it may be cool to say that one rides a Ducati. I do understand that. And on top of that, it can be very quick as it's the most powerful motorcycle in the segment, also on paper. That can be cool despite some downsides in the form of short gearing here. Still very exciting. Now, what may seem weird, I actually consider amazing handling a more exciting feature up to some point. And here the fourth place on my list goes to BMW R1250 GS. That also gives us super fun experiences when braking. Close to it is KTM 1290 Super Adventure S. That looks brilliant, that sounds better than a GS, and it delivers even more fun performance than the Multistrada V4, more useful performance. On the second place, there's BMW S1000XR that can offer insane accelerations, also at very high speeds, at high RPM once you get there. It can cause what I call a blurry vision effect like KTM, but in a surprising way, because up to some point, the faster you go, the quicker it accelerates. But my number one bike with the most X factor is a KTM 1290 Super Adventure R. That comes with great tires, allowing you to actually use all that insane power right from the beginning. And here, the second thing that you may experience and fall in love with, like I did, is the aggressive and very stimulating sitting position. It's just something different that makes you feel like you can do anything with this bike at any point, except for cornering at higher speeds, but let's leave that for now. To sum up all this and put it in an easy to digest form of final scores for these, first as city motorcycles and then as touring ones. The one that I feel is the least rider friendly and fun motorcycle to ride in the city is Honda Africa Twin on the 11th position with still subjective 2 points out of 10. Better to me with 3 out of 10 points here would be Harley Davidson Pan America Special. Then with 4 points out of 10 is Triumph Tiger 1200 Rally on the 9th place. Right before it would be sitting KTM 1290 Super Adventure S with 5 points, then BMW S1000XR also with 5 points, but being better balanced. More well-rounded here, but still with 5 points, is Suzuki v-strom 1050 on the 6th place. Then a bike that I already could recommend for city riding, so a Ducati Multistrada V4S with 6 points out of 10 in city riding. On the 4th spot, also with 6 points, is a very proper Tiger 1200 GT that isn't as good in the city as the next one. So a Kawasaki Versys 1000 SE that is amazingly balanced despite feeling rather heavy. At very low speeds where you squeeze between the cars, it gives you amazing control. So it's great in the city with 8 out of 10 points. But a KTM 1290 Super Adventure R is even better, receiving 9 out of 10 points. And wow, this is a blast in the city. Sort of counterintuitive, I would think, in the beginning before riding it. You sit super high, it's pretty comfortable there, except for the foot pegs, but well, you don't ride for 7 hours in the city. You feel amazing control over the bike at low speeds. Having narrow handlebar helps you squeeze between the cars, and you still have that low and high-end power available if you want to play with it. Sitting in a super exciting position makes you just want to play with it and explore more and more. Just not too fast, of course, as it's an enemy of corners, just like the Versys. Also 9 out of 10, and the first place go to BMW R1250 GS, which is not scared of anything here in the city. There's perfect balance and control over the bike, and just a wide handlebar needs to be considered. But to me also a psychological obstacle are those 2 large cylinders sticking to the sides and an engine that is generally not as much fun. Otherwise it could get 10 out of 10 as it flows through traffic like a pigeon between the leaves. But what about them serving as touring motorcycles, so riding at higher speeds, more in the corners and for longer? The last place goes to Kawasaki Versys with 4 out of 10 points, and not turning well nor reacting acceptably, in my opinion, to braking or accelerating the corners. Well, at higher speeds, brakes matter too. Then the 10th place goes to a KTM 1290 Super Adventure R, and another example of a motorcycle that's not very happy when trying to turn at higher speeds. It will go wide and you will likely struggle on a twisty road. Knowing this, I just cannot place it any higher. But I can put Honda Africa Twin 1100 with DCT there as it turns fine, and DCT may be a great thing when touring. Butt brakes a terrible, seats are a downside. So 6 out of 10 points. The same score, but a position higher, is BMW S1000XR that has really comfortable suspension. It's got good power once you drop all the gears and reach the red line, but it won't provide you with decent wind protection or a lot of joy when cornering, at least in my case. Better for touring is the v-strom, I feel, even despite not very comfortable seat, despite less power, but it seems just more manageable. You just want to take and ride it. It all goes to its pretty nice engine, but even better will, in my opinion, be KTM 1290 Super Adventure S, with lots of tech stuff, with great electronically adjustable suspension and fantastic and fun performance, especially at higher speeds when traction, when grip doesn't matter that much in a straight line at least. You definitely should replace its horribly hard seat. 6 points here as well. Then with 7 points is the Ducati Multistrada V4S that does a lot of things very well and doesn't really have many bad spots except for getting terribly hot, but that's mostly still low speed issues, so not touring, not most of the time at least. All tech is there and it's a solid, super expensive choice on the 5th place. On the 4th, I'm placing Tiger 1200 Rally that should be more comfortable than a Ducati and mainly only suffers from weak wind protection when riding at higher speeds. I still believe that an overall impression of a GT variant follows here as well, and this bike gets 8 out of 10 points as a touring motorcycle, as it feels lighter, easier to control also at speed, and more nimble and more explosive at the same time than a taller Rally. On the 2nd place, there is a Harley with a Pan America Special and also awesome suspension like Triumph's, but a nicer V2 engine and pretty much equally not satisfying wind protection. But remember that this can be fixed. It doesn't have a drive shaft, which is a big downside comparing to the Triumphs, but that engine is just really nice and enjoyable. And the 1st place with 9 points out of 10 goes to BMW R1250 GS. It's because it handles in a fantastic way, is comfortable enough, even though not as much as Triumphs and the Harley. It's got great flexibility, and once you ride faster, you don't hear that engine sound so much. Overall, I really feel that it does it best considering touring circumstances. Final rank. Putting aside my personal preferences and favorites, the least recommended motorcycle in this segment would appear to be Kawasaki Versys 1000, then on the 10th place is Honda Africa Twin 1100, then the Harley, BMW S1000XR on the 8th place, Triumph Tiger 1200 Rally, KTM 1290 Super Adventure R on the 6th, v-strom 1050 on the 5th, and this is not actually reflected in the scores, but I feel that overall it doesn't have many potential deal breakers aside design for those that don't like it. So it's overall a solid proposition. Then we've got a KTM 1290 Super Adventure S on the 4th place, and finally the top 3, starting with the Ducati Multistrada V4S to the Tiger 1200 in a GT variant, all the way to the good old BMW R1250 GS that does it all very well or even brilliantly. And now, as a fun fact, I promised you that, it's the Ducati that's listed as an overperformer in the largest number of categories, with being above average in 82% of areas, while the GS in 76%, followed by the KTM Super Adventure S in 75% of scored areas. The biggest underperformer is actually the v-strom and Africa Twin equally, both below average in 71% of categories, followed by a Versys 1000 underperforming in 65% of categories. Which one would I buy based on my preferences? Well, that would be either a KTM 1290 Super Adventure R to play around with, or a BMW R1250 GS simply for that joy of flow in moving when riding. My perfect motorcycle would be KTM's engine sitting in GS's chassis for that handling, and with Triumph's super comfortable suspension. Now let me know if you stayed all the way till this point and tell me what you guys think about these results and what your pick is or would be. I hope that you enjoyed it. Thank you for being here. This video is a big thing to me. It took a lot of analyzing, a lot of time, and to know more in detail about each and one of those motorcycles, head to my full reviews linked in the description.